everyone. Welcome to another session of Python. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time on one of these sessions, please note that we have a check-in page that has some links that are for this session. So some resources. It's the Learn module that our speaker will be kind of covering and some additional information. This is the 5th session of this series. So if you missed any of the first ones, which are a little bit more of the intro, we do have an on-demand YouTube playlist that includes those. So you can revisit that information and also the event series calendar. So if you, check in aka.ms/reactor check-in with enter event ID 14358, you'll be able to access those resources. This is just our code of conduct. So Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. So we just encourage engagement in the chat, but we just ask you to be mindful of your commentary, remain professional and on topic. This session is recorded. You'll not appear in that video. The recording is uploaded to the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel, usually 48 hours to 72 hours or so it takes to get up there for later on-demand access. So if you have to drop off early, or if there's things you want to re-reference, it will be available there probably in a couple of days. I'll share the link to our YouTube channel in the chat shortly. If you have questions, and this is your first time joining us on a YouTube live session, you do need to have an account created with YouTube to interact in the chat. I would do that now. Or if you have questions and you're not able to log in at the moment, you can always message us later and we'll try to get those answered for you at a later date. I see a couple of people already are engaging in the chat. Welcome, Vinay. Also, Bruce, thanks for joining us today. This is going to be a good session. And then today, today's session is, as I mentioned earlier, the 5th and final session of this 5-part Python series. We're joined by Alfredo Deza, a cloud advocate here at Microsoft, going through it again. Today's workshop will guide you through creating your first Python program. This is the culmination of the last few sessions where we kind of got a lot of intro information. So this is the final step in this series. At this time, I'm going to bring up our speaker. Hello, Alfredo.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome. Doing all right, doing all right. It's exciting. We've been at it for a while now over the course of the last month or so. We're week 5 now, and it seems like there's a lot of people tuning in. Welcome, everyone. Glad there's so many excited Python programmers, new Python programmers out there. You can let us know your experience as well if you work in other kind of programming, but not Python. If this is brand new for you, that sort of stuff, just let us know in the chat. All right, I'm going to step out of here. Let you take over.
All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you all for being here. This is our last session in this series. This is again very exciting for me. It's excellent to be talking about Python, showing you some of the things that I've worked on for many years. And yeah, so today we're going to build our first Python program. So we're going to be sharing the learning path module that we're going to be using today as a reference, but we are not going to follow it strictly. We're going to be doing something slightly similar. We're going to create a command line tool application, and we're going to start from scratch, like one file. We're going to put into place many of the concepts that we've already covered: Booleans, conditionals, modules, functions, And we slightly touched on a little bit of the things that you have to do when you're trying to run a Python file as a command line tool. But we're going to see if we have some time to do some packaging. Packaging in Python, it's kind of difficult. It might be tricky. And what we're going to be doing today is seeing if we can figure it out and make a command line tool. When I first started doing Python, I thought it was pretty incredible. It's like, oh, wow, I can actually package these and make it a command line tool, an executable that I can just distribute. Maybe push it over to the Python package index, which is the repository of Python packages, where you can just install packages via Python installation tools like pip. And it's just, I think, a very nice way to distribute your work, make it available for others so that they can install it and make it available in their environments as well. So, all right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start with, well, this is VS Code. We've already talked about how to set up your environment. But I'm gonna, instead of like starting like this with VS Code already open, I think I've shown you there's a really neat thing in VS Code that provides a command line tool called code. So if you open VS Code, you want to make sure you have it installed. You go to the command palette and you say code. If you type code, the first option you have is this shell command install code commanding path. What that does is it makes available an executable that if you run it, it will create, it will open VS Code exactly where you started from. So instead of like starting right here from VS Code, I'm going to start from the terminal. Okay, I'm going to create a new directory from scratch, and I'm going to create a subdirectory, and then we'll start from there. Right, so I'm going to open up a terminal. Give me 1 second. Remind me later. Let's just give it a second. And I want a new window. Let's see. A new session. Give me 1 second here while I try to figure out where is iTerm. So let me quit iTerm. So iTerm is just a terminal. I'm gonna quit that. I'm gonna try to run it again. Yeah, there we go. All right, I know this is super small, so don't worry. I'm gonna make it much bigger. Okay, so we're gonna create a new directory. I'm going to call it, we're gonna create a command line tool called JFormat, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So I'm gonna create a directory called JFormat. We're gonna go into this directory. It is empty. There's nothing in there, and inside of there, I am going to create a subdirectory. So JFormat is the name of the directory where all of my files are going to be, and I'm going to create a subdirectory where all of my code is going to be there. So I'm going to call it the same name. So I'm going to do JFormat. All right. So now we have our directory, and now what we can do is open VS Code from here. So I'm going to say code dot and do that, and boom, we have VS Code opening right where we want it. I actually forgot one thing. Well, we can see if I think VS Code will want to reload, but just to make sure, I'm just gonna close this. And there's one. along this series, there's these constant questions like, do I need a virtual environment? How do I create a virtual environment? What is a virtual environment? Do I need to activate one? We're going to create one today. We've already created one or two in the past, but I'm going to close these once again. I'm going to create a virtual environment. A virtual environment is a self-contained Python environment where I can install libraries, uninstall libraries, and not mess with the current system Python. This is critical because if you're installing new libraries or you're making changes to the libraries that you have there, you can get into trouble where you can get into inconsistencies for the libraries. Like there can be some collisions. Some application wants one version, the other application wants a newer version. You get into an inconsistent state, and it's hard, if not impossible, to recover from that. So best practice here, tip number one, create a virtual environment always, whenever you can. So I'm going to, the way you do that with Python, at least in Python 3, is we're going to do Python 3 -m. We're going to call it VM. And that -m means like use the module from Python called VM. That's the module that is going to give us the facilities for creating a virtual environment. And next, I'm going to pass the name of the directory. I am going to use VM as well, just because I think it's pretty consistent. It's going to tell us exactly what we're going to do. Now, if I'm hitting return, you're not going to see much activity there. It's just going to be, it's going to take a second. There you go. And nothing else happens. And so if I list the contents of the directory, VM is going to be there. Next, you want to activate this environment. We're going to use source. We're going to use VM bin activate. Now, this process also works on Windows. So if you're using a Windows computer, it's a slightly different. I think it's the actual, like if I list VM bin, you will see that there's a bat file. There should be, oh, well, it detected that I'm not on a Windows system, so it doesn't include it. But like it is, there's actually, like if you're on Windows, like a bat file will be generated and you just run that. So you can definitely do that. So let's activate the virtual environment. What this does, like if I want to know what Python I have, it says, well, Python is coming from this very odd path here. What I want is Python coming from the virtual environment. So I'm going to do source VM bin activate, and then that is going to cause that my see how my prompt change. You have here VM on the very far left at the bottom. So that means that the virtual environment is activated. So if I now do which Python, it should point all the way to my path. I'm gonna clear all these so we're back at the top. And now from here, with my virtual environment activated, I'm going to run code once again. I'm going to do dot, meaning like from here, launch VS Code. And there we go. And so VS Code, that's fine. It's prompting us to like install certain things. So we have our JFormat project here, a subdirectory called JFormat, and our virtual environment. So within JFormat, there's nothing. We are going to create our first file in here. Okay, so we're gonna say new file, and we're gonna call this main.py. Okay, so what we are going to be doing today, what's the idea behind the tool? It's very useful to have like kind of like your ideas in order, like what's the objective that we want to achieve today. And what we want to achieve today is, the requirement is, hey, we're going to build a command line tool that given a path to a JSON file, okay, given a path to a JSON file, we're going to read that JSON file, and we are going to reformat the contents of that JSON file and make it very readable. JSON is a data format that can be shown or displayed in different ways and contexts. And it can be very unreadable, or it can be very user-friendly and very readable. So we're going to create this one tool that allows us to do this thing very easily by reading a file and then reformatting its contents so that it looks very, very nice. Okay, so first step is, the first requirement is, hey, we have a main.py file, and we want to point to another file, a JSON file, right? And then we want to read it. So we need to accept an option. Well, I'm not going to cover libraries or frameworks for command line tools here, because then that would involve like a lot of extra time that we need to go into details on how those work. I'm going to show you like a very straightforward way of doing this. We are again, we're not going to use any libraries. We're just going to like straight out, very simple, very minimal, no dependencies. I'm just going to use Python itself and its standard libraries to deal with arguments and seeing if we can make that happen. So first off, we're going to create our main function. I'm just going to call it main for now. We're going to need some pass some arguments here. We can say, for example, JSON path. We can say for now, let's just assume that someone somehow is going to pass us that JSON underscore path argument, and we're going to make it work so that we can read that from. So next, we are going to open that file. We're gonna go bit by bit. One of the tips here is that when you're building a command line tool or an application from scratch, try to go as slow as possible, as step by step as possible, with minimal. Like don't try to go and do the whole thing. I've listed like several requirements. We need to get a file as an argument in the command line tool. We are probably going to create a command line tool. So that's 2. We're going to reformat the contents of that file and print it out to the terminal. So that's 3. That's a lot of stuff. That could be several files. Let's just not worry about it. And so what we're going to do right now is just we're going to create a function that's called main, and we're going to read this JSON path, and then we're going to print the contents as is. All right. So we're going to do with open, which is a kind of like a standard way. Like if you've never used this type of this type of it's called a context manager. If you've never used the with keyword, then it's just a way of like creating something or doing some action, and then it automatically figures out how to clean up after itself. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna open the JSON path, and we're gonna say we want to do that in read mode, and we're going to call this open JSON file. I'm gonna call it about open file. I really like expressive variables that actually tells us what it's doing, and we are going to do contents. I'm going to assign the contents of this file as a variable called content. So we're going to say open file that read. So open file is the variable assigned of the opened file. I'm going to read it, and the contents is just going to come as a big string. So that's it. We're going to open that file, and then finally we're going to just print those contents out. Contents, that's it. And if you remember from the previous session that we had, we briefly touched on this at the very end of the session, and we did if under name equals under main run main JSON path. Now, a couple of things here, and I know I have a warning here with the squiggly underline, yellow underline here. What is going on here? If you were not present in the previous session, what is going on here? We are saying, hey, if this file is being executed on the terminal, on the command line, then run the main function. If I didn't have these, nothing would happen. There's nothing that would call the main function. It doesn't happen automatically in Python as it does in other languages. For example, Golang, or the Go language, does this automatically, for example. In Python, there's no automatic invocation of a main function. It's not, the main function is not required. This function could be called anything. And we would still need to manually like make that connection. Hey, like when this thing is getting called on the command line, run whatever function I want it to run. So we have a squiggly line. And so why do we have a squiggly line? Well, one of the things with Python is that we have a scope. That means we have a certain number of variables that we've declared, and they must be declared. They must be coming from somewhere. Well, JSON path at this point, the way this program is going to get executed, Python is going to read this file, is going to parse it, and is going to, the first line that is going to hit is the line number 8, because it's a line that is not a function. So it's just going to read that. And it's like, oh, if underscore name underscore is main, then execute this function. So it's going to come to line number 9, and JSON path at this point in time is not defined. So we need to pass an argument. How we do that? How do we do that without any libraries or anything? Well, there's this nifty module called sys. So we're going to import that module to use it here. We're going to say import sys. And the sys module has a helper that can read what is passed on as an argument. Okay. So let me, if you've never seen that before, let me comment this out for a quick second and show you. We're going to print sys.arg v. Okay, so argv is a argv is the helper that we're going to use to see what's coming on the what's being passed as an argument. Okay, so how about we run these? We're gonna run it. We're gonna use this button here. So couple of things that I want to, maybe you're already aware of these, but when I click that button, VS Code by default figure out like, oh, this session is already using a virtual environment, and it automatically uses the right Python executable from the virtual environment. But pretty useful feature. I don't need to do any extra steps. And what it comes out is a list with a single item. What's that single item, or that one first and single item inside of that list is main.py, the whole path, the absolute path to that main.py file. So sys.argv allows us to have that there. Now, if I say I'm not gonna use now the play button, I'm gonna use the terminal here at the bottom. If I do say ls, you can see that JFormat is in there. What if I pass some arguments? So if I go and say Python JFormat main.py, and then I say example.json, just to see what happens. So now we have the path to main.py, and the next one is example.json. So what's going on here? Any argument that we're passing on when we're calling main.py will be included here. So I only said we only need one file. We're going to only work with one file. But if you wanted to use more arguments, and you can say foo_bar bash Alfredo, and I hit return, you would have those included here, as well as single items. Now, I'm going to kind of like cheat over here. And again, not using the framework. There's frameworks that take care of like dealing with this sort of like understanding what's an argument, how many arguments are you going to take? Are you going to take one? Are you going to take 10? Are you not going to take any arguments? And give you helpful error messages. We're not going to do error checking or error messages, and we're going to cheat and going to make it like super, super simple. What I'm going to do here is I am going to use the last argument in the arguments that are being passed to main.py to kind of like say, like whatever the user is passing, the last one, that's the one that I want to use. So here in my code, I'm going to say, since that argv is always going to be a list, so I'm going to use the last one by saying in square brackets, I'm going to use -1. That means give me the last argument. So I'm going to save that. And now if I rerun my command, we should only see Alfredo printed out. How about that? We're going to run that and look at this. The answer from our tool that doesn't do anything other than print out arguments is Alfredo, which is it's no longer a list. We're printing the last argument. I mean, you could do some error checking here as well if you wanted to prevent that. But like, again, that would be stepping into the territory of what a useful command line tool framework would be doing. I highly recommend Click if you want to check that out. It's pretty popular, pretty good. Python also has built-in command line tool frameworks that can help you out. But again, we're not going to go into those. All right, so far we don't have anything. We have something that prints out the argument. We know now that the last argument is going to be our JSON file. So we're going to go back here. I'm going to try to close these. Let's see. How can let me see if I can try to close high panel, kill terminal. There we go. All right. So now we know that the last item is in the arguments is going to be the file that I want to work with. So we're going to say JSON path equals sys.argv -1. That way we can call main.json path, and this should work. So I'm gonna save these. I think if I run it, nothing. Well, if I run this as is, the main.py file will be the one that gets printed. But let's, this is going to be easier, I think, if I show you the terminal. So I'm going to use iterm here. And then I'm going to go into JFormat. And then I have main.py. So if I do Python main.py and I say example.json, what do you think will happen? What do you think will happen? Let's try and run this. I think this will explode and break in all kinds of interesting ways. Let's try and see that. Ooh, look at that. No such file or directory. So what's happening here? We're trying to read that file and it doesn't exist. So let's create a JSON, an example.json file here in the upper level, and we're going to create some. Let's create a quick JSON file here. We're going to say program. We're going to say it's main.py. Name, we're going to call it JFormat. Right? So this is valid JSON. We're going to write that, quit. Let's run this tool again. We're going to say Python, JFormat. We're a level up. So we're going to say main.py. And we're going to pass in our example.json. Let's see what happens here. Aha. So it managed to read that file and print the contents. But so far, it's not doing any reformatting, right? We want this to do some cool reformatting. So Python has these ability of reformatting files with the JSON module. So this is valid JSON, and we want to reformat it. What would reformatting do for us? Well, it can sort the keys. Like if you want them sorted, like say for example, if you had keys that started with A and keys that started with Z, then they would respect some order. And then the other thing that it could have some indentation. So let's go back to VS Code, right? And let's create. You could optionally, of course, if you follow the previous session where we did some modules, this could be in a separate module. But for sake of speed, I would have it here. I would highly recommend putting in a, well, actually, you know what? Let's just do that. Let's just create a new module. Let's just follow best practices here. I'm going to say create new file, and we're going to say formatter.py. And inside that formatter, we're going to create our formatter. We're going to import JSON. JSON is the module that's going to do our have like the utilities that we need. And we're going to call this we're going to call it format. The format is going to accept a string. We already have the string, which is the contents of the file. And we are going to say return JSON.dumps. Dumps means actually is dump string. I would prefer that to be named dump string instead of dumps, but that's how the Python standard library named this module. And we are going to actually, before we dump it, we need to sorry about that. We need to load the string as JSON. So we're going to say loaded JSON equals JSON that loads, which stands for load string. So now this means that loaded JSON is like JSON that's actually now being loaded into Python. And now we're going to return JSON dumps loaded JSON. And then here's where the magic is going to happen. We're gonna say, I'm gonna try to reformat this a little bit. So we're gonna say sort keys. I'm gonna say true. So we're gonna be sorting the keys, and then we're going to be saying indent equals 4. So what is it that we're doing there? We are saying you're gonna load the string as JSON, and then we're gonna use the dump string function from JSON, and we're gonna pass in the loaded JSON, and we are going to sort the keys, and then we're gonna give it four spaces for indentation. So I'm gonna save that, and then back in main.py, we are going to import that from formatter, import format. All right, so that imports our function. So now in main.py, we have the contents as a string, which is exactly what our format function has, and we're gonna say print format contents. Okay, so what's happening here? Let's quickly go over the steps of what we're seeing there. We have our main function. We've opened the JSON path in line number 6. Then we have the contents because we're reading the file, and then we're printing the return output from the format function. So I'm going to save these, and now I am going to go to my terminal. So let's run this again and see what we get. I'm going to clear this so that you can see it at the top. Let's run this again. Python jformat / main.py example.json and see where we land. All right, so that's very different from what we had before, right? We have something that is, I think, is a little bit more readable. Perhaps it's tricky to see here exactly why this is useful. Let me see if I can find JSON example JSON output that we can we can use. So we have. I just found an example one. So we're gonna do. Let's update our file so that it looks like gnarly, really. And we're gonna say, how about that? That looks like very. That looks like a little bit more complex. So we can say, well, that already looks like uh, that looks like JSON. Let's see, JSON example. Well, look for something that is compressed format. Let's see, JSON. I'm searching for something that can help us make these a little bit. Actually, we can do it right here. So if I go here, I'm gonna make these. Usually, when you have JSON that is not formatted, it will look like this. Do you think this is readable? When you're dealing with APIs, when you're seeing APIs that do this, so if I want to look at that, it will. This is how you usually will have. You will see JSON like compressed, unreadable, like you have no idea what's going on. So, what is the deal here? Well, the reason why you will see it compressed is because whenever there's a space or there's a gap in between them, you will you're kind of like paying for space. It's almost like real estate. You have space there, and that gets translated into uh, disk space or memory space that is not really efficient. So in this case, we have 4 lines of JSON, but imagine if you're dealing with 100 megabytes of JSON. If you are having it in a real like well printed out format, it's probably going to be more expensive. It's going to have more weight if you don't have it like this. But these are just implementation details of JSON. We don't care in this case. We know that we have something like this and we want to make it readable. So that's our example. Let's call again Python jformat / main.py example.json, and let's see what happens. All right. So it grabbed the contents. And it did this very nice representation, kind of like what we had before, right? Kind of like what we had before. But what if you wanted something like, so if we go back to our VS Code, what if like we go to our formatter, and of course this could be an option. What if we wanted to have only one space for indentation, right? So we could go back here and run this again. Ooh, very different, huh? Like we just ran it and now like the indentation has changed. Okay, so I promised that we would build a command line tool, a program that is actually doing something useful. It's formatting JSON for us, but we don't have a command line tool yet, right? So what I would like to do is have something like that. Something like I'm typing JFormat like this, and you know something comes up and it tells me, oh, this is a command line tool. So how do you do that in Python? In Python, you do this with a setup.py file. So we're going to go back to VS Code, and not within the JFormat directory. We're going to create a file right here at the top level, and we're going to call that setup.py. In this setup.py, you know, I think I have to find a Python developer that knows exactly how this goes and how to do it from memory. I'm certainly not doing it from memory. So if you don't feel like don't feel like you're going to that you're gonna get into trouble if you try to do them from memory. And if you're failing, don't have any doubts basically of what's going on. Okay, like I make these mistakes all the time. I'm not going from memory here. I'm going to try to replicate this from a separate file that I already have pre-made. So you're going to import setup tools. You go from setup tools, import setup and find packages. I'll tell you all about this thing. Setup is just a function, and we're just going to call that function with a little bit of information. We're going to pass a name. We're going to call our tool JFormat. We're going to try to be very, very minimalistic here. We are going to say packages. We're gonna say find packages. So now we've used both our imports. We've said setup, import setup, and import find packages. So find packages is just going to figure out what's going on there, like what files it needs, or where's the module. There are a couple of things that that you can do to automatically create or generate this JFormat. There's an entry points thing that's certainly valuable or valid, but we are going to create a script. So let's create a new folder. This is like this is just a different way. We're going to call it bin, and inside the bin directory, we are going to create a new file, and this is going to be our JFormat executable. All right, and I'll tell you why we need a JFormat executable without the .py. And the reason is because when the packaging kicks in, it's going to figure out user bin and Python, and the package is going to take care of all that. That's just the way, like that's just telling whatever it's calling this that this is a Python file. And we're going to say from JFormat import main, and then if same trick as before, and we're going to call main. If this is being called in the command line tool, we're going to call main.main. So what's going on there? We are importing our main. This is basically at the very top in line number 3. We're importing our main module, and inside the main module we have a main function. So that's why on line 6 we're saying main.main. So we're gonna save that back in our setup.py file. And I know I'm going a little bit fast here. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask them so that I can cover them and clarify. I know I'm going a little bit fast. I'm going to give you plenty of time to ask me more questions or do some follow-up. I know packaging can be tricky. But definitely, yes, please go ahead and ask some questions so that we can... where can I find the video from last week? Yeah, Asaf, great question. We'll post that in the comments in a second. But definitely this is a series, and this is the last session, and we have 5 this is the 5th session in the series, and definitely all of those series are available, including this one. It's available to watch once it ends. You'll have all of those you'll have all of those available to you to go back and just perhaps go and revisit some of the things that I've said and how we got to certain spots. All right, so our setup.py needs another thing here. We're going to say scripts, and scripts takes a list, and we're going to pass in the path for JFormat. What is this thing doing? So we've defined our name. We've told, hey, there's some packages here, and there's a script, or the variables called scripts for the setup function, but we're pointing to the location of our executable. So hopefully this should work, but there's already a bug, and we are going to call Python setup.py, and then we're going to call install. We're going to do iterm, and we're going to do ls. So we have our setup.py, and we're going to install. So how do we install a package? We're going to do Python setup.py, and we're going to say install. So this means it will grab our Python script, and it will put it in our path, and it'll create a command line tool for us. Hopefully, I'll run these. Ooh, look at that! There's a lot of information here that is coming up. Run install. There's a lot of egg information. This is old stuff from Python, that from packaging history in Python, that allows Python to figure out where's this file coming from, and it produces a lot of output. But you can see here that J format is now available. So if I do which J format, which is a way of telling like where's this thing, you can see that J format is now coming from our virtual environment. I'm going to clear here so that it's at the top. I'm going to call this again. You can see now that J format is now in my virtual environment. See why this is useful? Now my virtual environment is not polluted with my system. Python is not polluted with development tools that I'm trying to package and install. Now the J format executable is there. And if we try to see what's going on in that virtual environment, we can see that J format looks nothing like what we had. So what this is doing is just going to run a script that doesn't have a version. We can certainly put a version in there, and you can version that, but it's going to figure out all of those egg links, and all of that output was explaining what it was doing Python behind the scenes. It's just figuring out how to call these, where to find it, and how to run it. But like I said, there is a bug in here. What do you think will happen if I just call JFormat, the command line tool that we just built? What will happen? Well, let's see. Let's see if we run this. I'm gonna run it. And nothing, well, we got into trouble, but it took a second, but it says no module named JFormat. It's like a module not found error. So why do you guys have any idea why that would happen? The problem is that we're missing a critical file in Python. Okay, we're missing a critical file in Python. So if we say ls, we have JFormat. If we look into JFormat, we have a formatter.py and a main.py. Don't pay attention to this py cache thing. So why is this thing not working? The reason this is not working is because we have, I've forgotten to put a dunder init dunder.py underscore init underscore py. So what is that thing? What will that thing do? If I go here, actually, we can try it from the command line and see if that works. We're going to run Python, and we're going to say import JFormat, or from JFormat import main, and we are getting into trouble because the underscore init is not there. So I'm going to clear here, and we can do this with Visual Studio Code. And we can actually inside the J format, we can create a new file. This is just an empty file that Python would like, and we're gonna call this and dot underscore underscore init underscore underscore dot py. So we're gonna save this file and we're gonna go back to our terminal. So we're going to reinstall our tool so that because if I call jformat again, it's probably going to do that. In the packaging, the reason why this didn't pick it up is because it didn't find the underscore init file. That's a requirement for Python modules to include more files than one, and or Python packages. So we're gonna do Python setup.py install. It installed again, and when I call jformat, ooh, now we're getting a different error. So now we're seeing cannot import name format from formatter. So what is going on with this tool? We'll try to figure it out. We're getting into some trouble here, and well, let's just figure out. Well, it can't import format, so um, I am guessing that we need to revisit some of our files here. We're going to say I go to our setup.py file, check if everything is here. Packages is find packages. We are seeing Python packaging is sometimes very tricky. Let me try and add include package data equals true. Help menu is not very useful. And then I think we might need to have let's see if this works now. Oops. Let's see if this works now. If I go back to my terminal and I do, I have to run this Python setup.py again, run installation, and call jformat again. Oops, typed in one thing correctly. And it is still complaining. So I'm suspecting that there's a problem here with this zip import. So we're going to try to add another line to our installation, to our setup.py thing, which is we're going to say zip save. You can see what I'm typing here. Zip save equals false. We're saying, hey, don't compress this package as we go, and we'll try this again. So hopefully this works. We're gonna go back to our terminal. We're going to run Python setup.py install again, and we're gonna call jformat, and we're still getting into trouble. We're no longer seeing the zip module problem. We are seeing that we're still getting into trouble here. Let's just quickly do a workaround here. We're going to grab our main.py. So this is very good because like getting into trouble is it's very common. And so what we're going to do, the workaround, because I don't want to, we don't have another hour to spend in Python packaging problems. Just a quick fix would be, instead of importing, I'm just going to go here. I'm going to say, I'm going to copy paste this module, not import there, and just have everything in here. Ooh, I think I messed up here. Mess there. All right. So what I've done is like I'm no longer importing for formatter. That's what the packaging is complaining about. Now I want to go back to my terminal, run once again Python setup.py install, and then run jformat. Aha! Now we have a type error, missing one required positional argument. So Python has figured out, hey, I need an argument. Where is it? And we have one, right? We now we have an example. We have the example that JSON from before. Our command line tool is now working. So we're gonna say jformat example.json. Oh, type error, main missing one required position. So somehow our script is having some trouble. So let's fix that. So we're getting into trouble now because our bin file here, this thing has this. So now we need to do also the same trick that we did with sys. So import sys, and here we're gonna say sys.argv -1, just like before, right? So we're gonna do that. And not these, we're going to open up our terminal. If I quickly can get to my terminal. Once again, because I'm making changes, I need to reinstall the script again. Python setup.py install. And now jformat, and I'm gonna say jformat example.json. And look at that, it works. We have a command line tool. We did it. We figured out, we got into trouble. I did a quick workaround to try to get out of that problem with it, which is Python not really finding the files that I need. And it is now working. So we can always add more like help menu or something quick, but this allows you to create a working Python package that you can actually push to the Python package index. You can distribute these. You could say Python set. If you do Python setup.py help, it will use the help from setup tools, and it will give you all of the stuff that you can actually see. You know, there's verbose. You can add a name. You can use build. So if I do Python setup.py build, it will build. It will create a. I'm gonna use I'm going to use VS Codes to show you the files. It will be not bin but build. It will have OS 10. It will have some scripts, and inside this it will create this file that allows you to distribute. I think it's lib or bdist. No, lib. And then you have our files, and then scripts is the one file that we wanted to distribute. So you could actually do Python setup.py build, and it will create all the files. All right, I know, like I said, I'm going to have some questions. I think we're going to run over for a few minutes, but let me while you are asking me, sending me your questions for what we've done today. Please start asking me some questions so we can revisit some of the stuff that we covered today. I'm going to post here in the comments a repository that I have where a similar tool exists. So if any of these was kind of like I was going like too fast, you can reference that repository, poke around, see if it works, see what you can do different. And you can, and perhaps you can even make it better and add more options. So what we've done today, we figured out how to make a Python tool, and then we decided to create a module. We got into some trouble when some of our modules were not being recognized. I did a quick workaround by putting that formatter function inside our main.py. And we created a setup.py file, which is the one file that every single Python package that is properly packaged allows us to do things with Python and make it a package, and allows us to distribute that package and share with others and install it in our systems. We can declare dependencies there. We didn't cover dependencies, although we did create a virtual environment and work from there. So lots of useful stuff. I hope that you can now feel you now feel good in about confident about creating command line tools, and perhaps explore some of the useful frameworks out there. All right, we have one question. Let me see. Prasenjit says, will there be a resource contingency policy with unclosed open resource? Yes, yes, very good question. So in Python, so what this means is, in Python, if you're opening a file and you're reading its contents and you're not closing it, then you can get into trouble, because you've left a in operating systems call these like a file descriptor, which is a thing. It's like a pointer. It's something. It's a reference. It's something that says, "Hey, I have this file open over here." And if you're not closing it explicitly, you can get into trouble. However, I use a construct in Python called a context manager, and we've used the with open file, and that means that it will automatically open the file, and when the line finishes, it will close it. So it's super useful. You, of course, if you want to, if a context manager is not your thing, and you say, well, I just prefer to open it up explicitly, you can open the file, read the contents, and then say file dot close, and that will take care of everything. All right, so I think that's it. I don't think there's any more questions. I hope you found this super useful. We got into a little bit of trouble, as we've had in all of our in all of our sessions. We managed to succeed and get to an actual Python command line tool. Thank you so much for being here. I'm always on LinkedIn, so if you want to ask me questions, do a follow up, please reach out. Happy to clarify further. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alfredo. This was fantastic. I think this was a really great ending to the series. We had a lot of people out there tuning in. So I think a lot of people got some great resources and help from this. I dropped in the chat links to the Learn module that this is sort of based off of. If you want to learn, go through it again, we have that free Learn module available, so check that out. Alfredo shared his GitHub link, so definitely save that for later use. This session, as mentioned earlier, will be available on demand. The Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel, I shared the link for that as well. So lots of links in the chat. I know we sent a lot of information out there, but do definitely check all of those out, utilize all of that. This is great free learning content. Alfredo was wonderful to host this series with us. Hoping he'll be back again with us in later months. And yeah, if you can give us a feedback survey, that'd be fantastic. I dropped the link for that as well. Do definitely take the time. We use that information. You share a little bit about you, like your ability level, your background, things like that. And we use that for kind of figuring out the upcoming content that we want to put together. Who is our audience? That's what we want to know. Who's tuning in? What are the best things that they'd probably find helpful? So if you haven't done so yet, we do appreciate if you could just follow the link and enter event ID 14358. And then, yeah, if you're not part of our community yet, if this is your first time with the Microsoft Reactor, do definitely consider joining us. We have a website, microsoftreactor.com. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on YouTube. We also are on Meetup. Our Meetup listing is where all of our physical locations are, which we have 12 around the world. So definitely take the opportunity to check that out. And at this time, I think we'll call it. Thank you so much again to our audience for participating, and to you, Alfredo. This was fantastic.